I'm Stefan Baumann, and welcome to episode 10 of the Baumann Effect. Today you get a special treat because you get to be up close and personal with me. Yes, personal. Not my fault. Basically, as I walked up to my easel, my camera decided to zoom in. And when I say zoom in real close. Today you get to examine all of my flaws and all of the interesting things that are in my face. But nonetheless, try not to be too distracted about it because the content is good. Today we talk about transitions and brushstrokes, and we add some more keys to our list. We talk about focal point and a sense of place. Yes, I've added a sense of place to my list of keys. The great thing about this is that you will actually get to see me do more painting. Today I'm discussing some of the important things that artists need to know. So sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 10 of the Baumann Effect.
Talked about the 12 keys, and I'm sure that there were some questions. So if you have some questions about the 12 keys, please just post them in below, and I'll try to include them in our next talk. But this week, I'm actually going to add a couple more keys. I throw them out for conversation with my students, and like I said, I have like 100 students, and as I'm throwing this information out to them, I talk with them, I discuss them, I mold it, I shape it, I try to figure out if it has any value or not, and then if it doesn't, it gets removed from a key. But right now, we're talking about the keys, and the 12 keys that we have, those are the things, if you weren't watching last week, kind of give you an idea of the things that you miss. This Baumann Effect that we're doing is not only just a program that we're doing on Facebook, but it also is integrated to YouTube and Patreon. And last week we talked about the 12 keys, and we're live right now on Facebook, and I'm going to go over that. But all that information is also on YouTube, and it's been edited down and kind of cleaned up, sanitized for your protection, kind of like the coronavirus with a mask on. So you don't have to listen to all of my stories, but some of them. Of course, on my Baumann YouTube, there's a lot of more information about this and so much more. And now I have the Patreon station, which actually I finally got up and working. I put my first video in there last night. And so I love that format. And so I'm looking forward to working with that a little bit in the future. And if you want more information, go to my website at stefanbaumann.com. and check out my Patreon site. I spent this morning doing more content. Now, some of you have been watching the YouTube video. I actually started this painting a couple of weeks ago, and this morning before we started the Facebook Live, I actually worked on it a little bit more, and I'm going to try to get to that and show you the next phase on that so you can learn from that also. But I'm going to go over the 12 keys real quick. Concept. Central focal point, composition, temperature, brushstrokes, edges, transitions, drawing, perspective, horizon, memory skills. Number 13 are angles. Yeah, angles. Sorry about that. Yeah, angles. So that's an overview of that. So now I'm actually going to introduce, number 14 is the point of view. Now, I had discussed a little bit earlier about the horizon line, and I had talked to Eric Rhodes a little bit on a demo that I did with him and his site for Streamline Publishing, and we had talked about the horizon line is where our eyes are. That's actually so no matter if I'm kneeling down on the ground, that's my new horizon. But there's something that's really important that you have to get, is that the horizon line is always where your eyes are. But your point of view is different. And Eric had mentioned this, and he said, well, the horizon line is like, okay, so if you look straight out here, and he put a pen in his face just like that. And so, if you watch the video, you'll see when he did that. So he says, this is the horizon line, right? And then he goes, when you go like this is the horizon line. And it kind of throws me sometimes because I'm one of these artists that sits there and goes, what does that mean? I mean, what is that something that needs to be clarified? And I thought about it and I said, it's really important to kind of get that the horizon line is up here. But if our point of view is down here, the horizon line is still up here. But whatever we do in the point of view has to be now kind of like moved into the horizon line area. So you can't look down at something and look across at something. It's just impossible to have two things. So your point of view, if we're looking straight out, our point of view straight out, that's crucial. But if we're looking down or up, that changes our relationship to the canvas, because whatever we look at, that point of view, if we're looking up at an eagle, that point of view now is up here. We're looking at the eagle's center in our view, and that eagle has to be down in the center of the canvas. Your whole painting has to change. So the relationship of the painting has to change to the direction that the viewer, and oftentimes I find with my students, is that they'll paint something really wonderful down here, and then they paint something really wonderful up here, like they'll have this wonderful eagle up in the sky. And then they'll paint some eagle babies down below here, and some beautiful mountains. So you got like three things. And we can't see three things at one time. And when we're looking at it as a painting, it's very confusing. The composition should be of one thing. So the point of view is something that we're discussing. Another one that I find is really important, and I'm surprised I haven't included this before, but I've used this a lot. And it's kind of an old master's, long, thing that the old masters did for years and years and years when they put together compositions. When cameras were invented, the idea was, even back then, if you look at old photographs, they always had a sense of place. Which means that when you put together a composition, you usually have a foreground, midground, background. In fact, when we're discussing composition, and even like plein air painting, and there's like three types of painting, and one of the types of painting is a sketch. And a sketch can be just of something. Then you have a study, and a study it lacks the composition. So the sketch is like a preliminary thing that we put into a painting, and a sketch could eventually be a painting, although when we go into the museums, we actually see a lot of sketches that are just left. A study is usually not for a painting, it's separate. And in a study, the artist is actually paying attention more to the subject. It's like it doesn't have a foreground, midground, background. It is really just of the thing. So like a bug on a stump, or a tree limb by itself, or a tree by itself, or a river, or rocks, or whatever it is. A study is just that. A sketch is a preliminary painting, and a sketch has to have a sense of place. Now, sketches can be great paintings, and they can be kind of done halfway, but they do have to have the elements of the composition. And part of that is a sense of place. So as photography has changed and we've become more instant, we have a habit of taking pictures of things. Here's the Grand Canyon. Here's the ocean. But the thing is, we don't incorporate, for the most part, and we kind of adopt it now. We don't have a thing for the viewer to stand on. So when the old masters were actually painting these compositions, they always included the thing that they were standing on. And one of the things that I recommend, if you want to have a really beautiful painting, is to kind of think about that before you start. So like, I see a lot of Grand Canyon scenes, and you feel like you're in a hot air balloon, hovering. I don't know where I am. So a sense of place is like, is the viewer there? Where am I in this relationship? Am I sitting in a balloon? That's something I think I need to know if I'm really viewing the composition. Am I standing in the water? It's very uncomfortable psychologically to have all water in front, because you feel like you're standing in the water. And furthermore, when you have all that water, you don't have eye magnets, which is what we're going to be talking about also in the future. But you've got to have an element in the painting that the viewer is solidly on something. The viewer has some rocks, some forms. They know where they are in relationship to the Grand Canyon. When you're working from photographs, we're usually taking a photograph of this. And usually when we're taking a photograph of this, we forget this. Yet, I would say that if you look at old masters' paintings done on location, they always included the foreground. Because they didn't have a camera to take this. And even the photographers of that time, you will see they always included some kind of foreground. And because of the invention of photography and what we accept now, that has been kind of lost. And it's kind of hard to put together a really good composition if you don't include the sense of place. You know, you need the foreground to get eye magnets. You need the viewer to feel like, what is my relationship to this? In fact, the foreground even shows us the size and dimension of everything behind it. It's a thing that we can kind of relate to. But I tell you, when we go to the Grand Canyon, and I bring students there, I brought 17 groups to the Grand Canyon to paint when it was easier to, without all the permits. And, you know, the Grand Canyon is huge. And you stand at that cliff and you go, how do I get all that
You get lost
into a little canvas, a little 8 by 10? So one of the things that I would tell people, and this is a really good tip, and that is, do the foreground first. So draw the trees of the Grand Canyon first, and the rocks first. And then once you get that relationship in there, then throw the items in the back. If you're going to paint Mount Shasta, you know, when you paint, it's like you run out of foreground. When my students do my workshops, it's like I have these big peaks that just run off the canvas. How do you stop that? How do you, first thing they say, how do you get all of this? A lot of people they get intimidated by going to Yosemite because how do you get that in a little tiny canvas? Yeah? And the way that you do it is you actually have to constraint yourself. And you do that by concentrating on the front. And we can relate to the trees and the road and, you know, whatever it is in the front. And then once you get that, you can get a sense of scale of how big things need to be behind there. One thing after painting the Grand Canyon for so many years, and if you watch my Grand Canyon video on YouTube, I give a demonstration there, and I talk about this sense of place, is that how small those big features are on a little painting. So when you start, you kind of view them, and when you view a composition, it's like you look at it. And as you look on it, your eyes focus in on it. So I do a thing with my students. I have them like look around a room. And while they're looking at a room, I sit down and go, do you see a light switch? And they go, yeah. And I say, do you really see a light switch? And they go, yeah. And I say, can you see the toggle in the white light switch? And they go, yeah. And I say, can you see the screw that holds the plate on that's above the toggle on the light switch next to the door? And they go, yeah, yeah. Okay. So the whole thing that happens, this is what happens when we're outdoors, is like I tell you to look around the room. And all of a sudden, you don't see a light switch. You're looking at the room going, why is he having us look at the room? And then I say, look at the light switch. And all of a sudden that light switch becomes this big. And then when you look for the toggle, it gets this big. It's just like you get bigger and bigger. And that's what happens with the way that our brain does, is that when you focus on something, and you see this in movies sometimes because they try to do this, where the actor is standing there and the whole background is like zooming in. It's kind of like there's a revelation or something like that. They got some insight. It's like, woo, and they almost go, oh my God, we need to get out of here. You know, that's a trick that they use. But that's the way the brain works. And so when you're out there at the Grand Canyon, and you look out there, you see this beautiful rock out there. The sunlight hitting it. And when you focus in on it, all of a sudden, that's all you see. And you try to lift that up and put that into your painting. And all of a sudden, then you have no more room. That element, I mean, it took me 3 or 4 trips to the Grand Canyon to really get like those mountains back there that appear so big are just little tiny things in their canvases. And you get that by doing the sense of place. You do the foreground so that you have some kind of idea of what's everything around it. So the sense of place is really crucial when we're putting together a composition. And it's really a crucial element that we need to learn. And it also helps support the eye magnets to help the viewer come around the painting. We'll discuss that in a future talk. And then practice. I don't know if we could actually have the 12 keys if you don't include practice.
Oh, so that's number what?
That would be number 16.
Oh my gosh.
I know, it just gets bigger and bigger. You know, the thing is, Cezanne said, I was told it was Cezanne, so I've got to get a lot of people there to go, it wasn't Cezanne, it was Churchill, or whoever it was. Somebody out there in history said, painting is really easy until you start learning how to do it. And the thing is, that's really the key. It's like, oh my God. And the thing is, so many people sit and they go, oh, you just put a little bit of blue here, a little bit of... But I tell you, when you study this, the practice of painting, it is very difficult. And a lot of my students are like going, you're giving away all the stuff that we pay you for. And I go, look, I tell you all these things every week. I tell you all these things, and you still come back for coaching because it still doesn't come together 100%. Yeah, so the question is, let's do with that one question. Is story important element, or can you do a painting without story?
I've been told it's kind of important. Am I wrong? Maybe. And when I look at something I want to paint, I think of a story in my head.
Yeah.
Because I can relate to it. Depends.
Well, the thing is, okay, so you could have a story of a cowboy out on the field. That story, he's got a lame dog and a pickup truck that's broken, and he's writing a song on the guitar. And it's like his life is over, and he's going to do a Thelma Louise over the cliff. Okay, so you could have a story like that. When we study the effect of light, when we are looking at a light story, that in itself is a story. So when we just take something like this and we're just lit up, there's no story. It's like it's just ordinary. But a story is created the moment when ordinary becomes extraordinary. Yeah, it's like we live in Medford here. I live up in Mount Shasta, but we're in Medford right now. And if you want to participate, be here with us, it's free. Just come on down. In July it starts at 2 o'clock. But if you're in the Medford area, Oregon area, drop in. Central Art. But it's a beautiful place. But sometimes, like right now, we're in, June, middle of June, and it's 90 degrees outside. It's freaking hot, and at 12 o'clock it's boring. I've been to the Grand Canyon at 12 o'clock. And why would somebody want to go? I feel sorry for people who take tours to the Grand Canyon midday. By the time they get there from Vegas, it's, there's no surprise. If you want to get to see the Grand Canyon, don't even bother until sunset or sunrise. You have to be there at those hours, otherwise don't go. So I painted at the Grand Canyon, for instance. I don't know we're talking so much about the Grand Canyon, but midday it's boring. Today is boring outside. And yet, if you get up at 4:30, 5:30 in the morning and the sun's coming up, there's your story. And the way that the light comes in and hits objects, that's your story. The Grand Canyon, my story was, I was there painting with a colleague of mine one time, and it was 12 o'clock, and I was on this roll. I would be doing 2 or 3 paintings in the morning, 2 or 3 paintings in the evening, and it was like midday, what am I going to do? I'm going to paint. And so I was out there. It was August. It was 115 degrees. And there was a condor on a big tree out there, and the background was just dead. 12 o'clock dead. And you know what my story was? What does the Grand Canyon look like when you paint it with no story at 12 o'clock when it's 150 degrees and even the condor is like spent? And so I painted this midday thing, and it was great. You got it. When you looked at it, you said, wow, that's the Grand Canyon at 12 o'clock. And I go, yeah, you got my story. So the lighting is the story. some people, when they do the homework assignments, they do donuts. And so they could sit on a plate and they could just be lit. Or you could have light coming through a window, hitting a coffee cup and a table and a newspaper and then a donut. And your guys' homework this week, wasn't it donuts? So yeah, if you go to stefanbaumann.com, the coaching section, and go down below, you'll see paintings done under the coaching program. There you can see some of the examples of the different donuts my students have done as homework assignments, because it's one of my homework assignments. Because I feel that if you wanted to find the answer of whether or not there is a God, you can find it in a donut shop, because that, having something that marvelous, had to be invented by somebody that had to be a God. I mean, donuts are here as proof that there is a God. But then I counter that, because if there was a God, avocados would have smaller pits. But anyway, what was the other question? You thought I forgot.
Yeah, I'm good. After the foreground, do you start with the CFP? So you said painting the trees and the stuff, and then...
Well, the thing is, the foreground has to be part of the concept. So the question was, after you put the foreground in, then you start on with the center focal point. Well, first you got to start with the concept, and in that concept you got to say, I got to think of a sense of place. I got to make my viewers sit here, and so you go shh, and you put that in, and then you scrape that in. However you want to do it, pencil or anything. My main thing is like, be sure that you get going on your painting very quickly. And get that damn canvas covered fast with big brush strokes, big passionate things. Don't even worry if it's right. But be sure you have a central focal point. Be sure you have your foreground. And as soon as all that's in chaos, then you go into the center focal point. And you work out from there. So you do, but the thing is, you don't start with the foreground and then the central focal point. You literally embody the sketch in it. So, any other question that's out there? Cool. Okay. So, the sense of place, practice. We're into practice. So, one thing I said, if you want to become a great artist, you have to really have discipline. And part of that discipline is practicing. And I have students that go, I'm going to spend a week just painting clouds. And I go, don't do that. Because, I guarantee you will not have that much invested in it. You'll do a couple of puffy things here and a couple of stratus there, and here a cloud and there a cloud. Some look like sheep, some look like this. But you're not really trying that hard, because you're just kind of in like dipping your toe into the pool to see whether or not there's no practice. It's like, don't practice trees. There's so many trees, you could never practice all the trees that are out there. If you're going to practice something, practice it on something that really counts. Get yourself a really expensive canvas and really expensive paints, and get out there and practice. And you don't learn anything until you push yourself beyond your comfort zone. Because if you're just practicing clouds, it doesn't matter. You're going to throw the painting away anyway. But if it's going to be on a major commission, you're going to curl your toes and clench your butt cheeks. And you're going to go, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And it's like when it doesn't work, you go, Like this morning when I was demoing on this painting here. I was adjusted the clouds and adjusted the clouds and adjusted the clouds. And one of the great things about doing oil paintings is that I could even go back and adjust it some more if I want to. Without having to repaint, but that's beside the issue. But anyway, so, the thing is, when you're trying to paint something for something and striving to become good, that's practice. And then the next painting is practice and practice. Now, if you learn an instrument and you practice that, like the piano, my mom sent me to piano classes. And I was a concert pianist at a very young age. In fact, I was supposed to go down to Brazil to play with a symphony. And it's like, I didn't like that idea of performing. I didn't like the fact that my art had to be ready so that I could perform. And now I'm doing this. But anyway, so I like painting because it was separate from that. But the thing is, I practice and practice, and every day I practice 8 hours a day. At the end of the day, I closed the piano, there was nothing left. There was no recording, there was no hint. Some of you that have husbands that golf, or some of you that golf, you're out there swinging, practice, practice, practice. You're down hitting balls. You're just, everything you're doing is just practice, practice, practice. You have nothing to show for it. The problem with painting is that you have this byproduct. You know, you practice and then you have this. This. It's like, what do I do with that? And then all of a sudden, for some reason, you think that practice has got value. And then you go, oh, I need to work on this. It's the holy grail of what I'm up to right now. Without, you know, really seeing things in context. It's just practice. And when you're through, put it into the garage. Because really, you're not going to get any good at painting until you have a whole garage full of crap. And you wonder what that crap is if you're practicing. And if you're practicing perfect, you know what that crap is? The perfect paintings you're striving for today, by next year, will be in the garage. You'll think they are wonderful. But the essence is that they're just stepping stones for other things. And the thing is, we feel like these have value somehow. If you think something's expensive, go learn golf. Golfing is expensive. Painting is not. So you learn golfing, and at the end of the day, you come home and you go, honey, I just, golfed in 93, or I golfed my age, or whatever your goal is. Well, really? It's like the fish that got away. There's no proof of it or anything. But if you spend your whole day painting, it's like all of a sudden you judge whether or not you accomplished anything by the outcome on your painting. And the problem that people don't get, the painting has no value in the practice, even if it sucks or if it's great. Because when you're practicing your brain. You're practicing so that you can go to the Grand Canyon and paint on location. You're practicing your eye-hand coordination when you're doing chords. You're memorizing in your brain. You're putting that stuff in your brain. When you're playing golf, you're just getting the brain and hands and your body all in sequence so that when it comes time, you can golf. And the thing is, when you practice painting, when you're learning this stuff, don't put emphasis. I see so much crap out there from people that go, oh, I just started painting. What can I do with my paintings? I need to go into a gallery. And I go, well, you got to need some lessons. You need to practice some while. You think, you kind of have to get, like I said, painting's easy until you learn it, and then it's difficult. It's like Sue's sitting there going, yeah, it is difficult. It's easy when you don't know anything. But the thing is, it's like you learn those things, and then you practice it, and you get better and better and better. Why? Because at some point, you're going to create a masterpiece. And you have to know how trees look and clouds look and how to blend transitions and color and stuff. And people are like, oh, Stefan, just let me watch you paint. Because they think it's some kind of like ta-da thing, It's like, no, it's hard. And the thing is, think about this. Throughout the world, we build museums filled with canvases done by artists. If a painting wasn't that special, if it wasn't that hard, it wouldn't be such a thing. When we go to Paris, we go see the Louvre. And we don't go see the Louvre to go see their, watercolors and some of that. We go see their oils. We go see the Mona Lisa. Because that's a work of art. And the thing is, even the Mona Lisa was created over 15 years because Leonardo da Vinci, my theory, is that, he had a little bit of low self-esteem. He didn't want it it's never been quite done. A little tweak here, a little tweak there. But he was always going after perfection, and perfection leads to paralysis. But when you learn this, you create artwork that has value, and you watch Antique Roadshow, and they'll have this beautiful big sterling silver vase with fountains and all this stuff. $100, maybe $1,000. On a good auction, get a stupid little painting done, by an American painter. Even like Grandma Moses, and they're worth, you go, come on, let's go see how much the painting's worth. Because it's going to be $100 grand, $150 grand. And the people always are so surprised as if they've never seen the Antique Roadshow before. Anyway, I digress. So, practice. Don't don't put any emphasis on it, but always practice perfect as if this was going to be your painting that you count on. I don't care about the painting students are working on today. I care about the knowledge that they're getting for future paintings. And the thing is, you will never be satisfied anyway. You will never be satisfied. Even if you practice for years, at some point, you're going to see somebody else's painting who's better than you, and all that practice you'll just ignore and go, I need to practice some more. So I worked this morning a little bit, I did this study a couple of days ago, and you can watch it on YouTube, it's still there. I think we took it down on Facebook because it wasn't, mechanically something didn't happen. But anyway, so I laid in the sketch. Notice my sense of place is that I don't have the mountain over dramatized here, and I shrink it down, and really it is about the setting that this mountain sets in. I grew up in Lake Tahoe, and I know the secret of painting Tahoe scenes. And you see this when you go to Lake Tahoe. What do you see? You see big areas of water with little tiny mountains and a couple of rocks in the front. What makes Lake Tahoe really beautiful is its setting. It's the big pine trees and the big boulders in front, and the lake is out there somewhere with the mountains, but it's not about the lake. This mountain is not really, I mean, it's spectacular, but the thing is, it's not really the setting. You know, when you live there, like you do.
It's a spread. Big spread.
Yeah, and the thing is, you turn a corner and all of a sudden you're totally in a different place. You know, you go from desert to oaks. So,
Question.
yeah.
Is there a hierarchy of where you put the most detail, like does the foreground get?
Well, the thing is, the most detail will actually be in the center focal point. In this particular area, the center focal point will be the mountain. Everything else is kind of like the sense of place and how it sits. A sense of place would even give us a scale. So like, this is where the Hotel Session was. And Session was a big hotel tycoon up in Mount Shasta. He built this beautiful lodge in here. And even John Muir and Bierstadt and Thomas Hill and these great artists stayed here. And it had this magnificent view. It had burnt down, and now the people who live here, you have to sit on the city street to go paint there because they don't move a rock, don't you? You know, they're so paranoid that us artists are going to do something. So anyway, so I went down and painted, and I talked about transitions. I talked about details in mountains, and now we're going to be doing something. I'm going to talk a little bit about transitions in a little bit so that you guys can actually get a pearl of wisdom out there somewhere. So anyway, so we got the effect of light in here. This is a beautiful meadow. If you've ever driven through Mount Shasta, and if you plan to go there this fall or spring, we always have a workshop in October and May. Plug. Anyway, Highway 5 runs like at the base through here. This meadow has been for sale forever, and you know, everybody there goes, oh, I don't want to.
Is there one on Lassen? Somewhere on Lassen?
No, this is like where the freeway exit is.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so anyway, so it's late evening, the light is coming, and we're going to discuss this middle area here. In that area, we got the element of the effect of light. Now, I'm using liquid. Liquid is actually, yeah, I use sometimes expensive mirager mediums and things, and yeah, liquid was kind of invented to be a substitute for some more expensive mediums, but this is just liquid. And let's get some white here. All right. So transition. So when we're doing the effect of light, you know, part of this painting is the feeling of light over on this side, and later on this afternoon we're going to be talking about really what light is, and you're going to learn the temperature thing later on. So that's going to be really good. But for right now, the effect of light, if you notice this area in here goes through the painting, and there's no change in value. There's no change in temperature. It's just one big spot. And what we want to do is we want to try to gear the viewer. Now transitions are kind of like crescendos. If you know anything about music, they're the undulating things that we see or hear when we hear a symphony. And crescendos are really, really crucial when you do music, because if you don't have crescendos, it's like listening to a, what do they call those band organs? You know, where you put a quarter in and you've got the cymbals and the piano playing and the accordion and all this stuff. Everything's like bum, 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 bum. Well, if you don't have transitions in the sky in your painting, and usually it's from lights to shadows, the painting's boring. So what we want to do is we want to start off here with the light, because the light's coming from the left-hand side, and we're going to actually like even pop up the light a little bit more. Now I'm going to make a transition not only from left to right, but also from back to front. And few people, when they're talking about eye magnets and composition, they're always thinking about this, but there's also the composition that goes back in and comes out. So you want to create two forms of transitions. Here we have the light color, and as that color works its way through the meadow, it stays about that tone, about that's lemon yellow in here. And then as it gets towards this side, as we get further away from the sun, that color will start changing into a little different color. I don't know if you can see that, but that color there is actually a little bit more of a yellow glow. Okay? And then it may even go into, and these are pretty strong colors for me right now, just because I'm trying to make a point. So what we're doing is we're actually changing colors here, here, here. And then eventually that light eventually burns out. So the color's actually starting lighter and going darker in here. And then also it's darker in the back. And lighter in the front. Now I'm going to get in trouble if I don't use. I had one student that she made a comment because she was watching. I was talking about how you hold your paintbrush, and so I said you have to hold your paintbrush like this because it opens and accesses your right side of the brain. When you do this, it's the left side of the brain. And she said, well, why do you tell us that you have to hold the brush this way and you go to the right side of the brain? But then when we watch you, you're doing it this way. No? It's like, oh, you know, say what I do. Don't say what I do, do what I say kind of thing, you know. But the thing is, I responded to her and say, that's because I'm not only just painting, I'm talking. And I'm thinking about what it is that I'm trying to talk about. So while I'm doing this, that what I ought to be, because I've got to explain this to you, I'm in my left brain and I'm accessing that part of the brain this way. So I was like, people are like, aha! I caught you! But can you see, just like that, that's a much more interesting, you know, light story in there. Again, a little lighter. And the thing is, what people often do is that they use too much white. When painting, I don't even need this. When painting, and your paintings start to look chalky, you know, that you're putting too much white into things. White is a value maker. You know, that's all it is. And so if you got something dark, you need to lighten it up. And beginning students, get the white out, get the white out. In fact, when you go buy white, you know, you have all these little tubes and then you buy big white. You know, like, and the thing is, there used to be a product called Primalba, you know, and it was like cold cream. It was like this wonderful, and it wasn't a plastic container so you could squeeze it and squeeze it and squeeze it. It's like, you know, Charmin. But it was, you know, it was almost too oily to get a highlight out of it. But you know, if you have a problem with your paintings getting chalky, you get yourself these little cups and you just place it over your white to kind of remind you. Don't highlight things with that, use different colors. you need a lighter yellow. Go to a yellow ochre out of the tube, or Naples yellow out of the tube, or lemon yellow out of the tube. You know, they have lighter colors for that. Don't just automatically throw white into things, because white just is a value maker. The only thing white does is make things go backwards and forwards. That's the only reason why you have white. Other colors are actually produced, you want to try to get them as pure as possible. So I'm going into more of a lemon yellow here to get the more lighter effect in here. And the thing is, you know, part of transition, we know, this isn't new news, part of the transition is you know, how it blends together. And the thing is, as you start working with that transition in there, you really start seeing, you know, illuminated quality. And the thing is, if you think of a dapple color, and we'll talk about this as we're talking about temperature, but if you see a dapple of light, the center of that dapple has more to do with the color of the sun than it does the grass it's lit up. And then all of a sudden outside of there, you get the local color, and that's usually that wonderful green that intense light going through a tree does. You know, it's like it magnifies light. And the thing is, you get that green in there, that's the transition color, and then you have the shadow, which is actually in theory absent of light. Okay, so here what we're doing is we're actually like taking the magnifying glass and really getting the light here. And the thing is, as I'm taking away that white color and I'm putting in more, this is like lemon yellow just right out of the tube. And as I do that, you can see it just gives almost like this wonderful effect. Probably a bit too bright for the overall painting, but the main thing is you know, the practice that we're talking about, so you kind of really learn it.
Does it risk competing with the focal point?
Oh yeah, yeah. That's why when you do a central focal point, you have to really get what that is.
Okay.
You know, and so with this painting, actually, the center focal point will actually be, because of the transition, is this will be a secondary focal point, because you always have 3 focal points. Did you know that?
No, you never said that.
I know, there's so much information.
So there can be about 3 focal points.
Yeah, there can be. But you have to understand how that works too.
Yeah.
You want to know how to work 3 focal points? Yeah, this is complicated stuff.
It is.
Anyway, so focal point, I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
Okay, you're my focal point.
Because that's the focus.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're having a conversation. You're my focal point. I'm looking at the camera now, and that's my focal point right there. So, so I'm looking at that. So let's just say I'm looking at the camera, I'm looking at the people out there, and they're watching me, and we're having a conversation right now. And if you notice, if you're in a conversation like that, I'm not standing there looking like this, looking at you, talking to you, and you're staring back at me, and we just stay there. It's natural for us to drift. So you see, you know, like if I'm talking to you, I look at Anita and I look at Sue over there, and it's like, you know. And so, yeah, so you're my focal point. But the thing is, if you're just sitting there, looking pretty like you do, and Sue's back there looking at her phone, yeah, everything's cool. The focal points are great. I'm talking to my friends over here. But if you all of a sudden stand up and run over to Sue and start stabbing her with a knife, all of a sudden my focus is no longer here. I'm like going, hey, don't kill Sue. So the thing is, with a focal point, and that's why it's key to know what that focal point is. You have a focal point, whatever that is, and you make that, you know, this obviously is going to be the focal point right here. You can tell how it's glowing right now. But that focal point I actually chose last week. That is a focal point. Obviously, it's going to be the brightest, lightest thing. That's my conversation. But then my eyes will drift off to another focal point. Lesser, little harder edges. This will be the hard edges, little softer edges. And then I'll find another focal point, maybe the tip of here, or something over here, a contrast over here. And what I'm looking for in a focal point is that it's like a straight triangle. So this point to this point to that point to this point. See how this goes? And the further that we go out, like if I sit and brighten a focal point out here, like I keep this really bright, but I do something out there, my eye actually drifts off there, and then I have to rely on the eye magnets to bring us back in. So, you know, I rely on anything I do over here, and that might point us to this focal point, and then whatever I do in here kind of has to bring us back to here. So the trees and everything leaned to there, this thing takes us back over there. And the thing is, the further these lines are out, the more we participate in the overall painting, and we rely on eye magnets to bring us back. So if our focal points are tiny, like one here, one here, one here, our participation is smaller. So if you want to get the viewer to feel like a little more spread out to see the whole painting, you do that. One of the things you see on a Thomas Moran is he'll put a really bright reflection at the base in the water down here. And that always brings the viewer down to the bottom of the painting and then brings them back up. How do you get the viewer down here? You know, so you kind of use them as, and then your transitions, if you do your transitions good, it's like transitions, they can make the viewer go really fast, like how you change them, or you can cause the journey throughout the whole painting to go much slower. It's like practicing perfect. So like, you know, if you're going to go into your studio, don't go in and go, Stefan's got a homework assignment, let's see. Oh, there's a bottle of water, he likes that. So put a light on it. God, I hate these homework assignments. The thing is that you should see some of my students who paint. I can tell at the beginning, you know, what mood you are when you go into your studio.
And you
It
can
shows.
tell who's practicing who hasn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The practicing, you know, you could tell. It's just like a musical instrument. You could tell. You watch these people with these gorgeous brushstrokes, and you go, "How can you do that?" Well, that's a lot of this practice. But the thing is, if you go into your studio as if you're going to paint something that is so spectacular. So the question is, well, how can you say that you go into your studio to change the world? I hear my students going, I was in my studio and I was looking at my painting and then I got tired and I laid down on the floor. My dog slept and we killed an hour that way. You know, it's like, don't go into your studio if you don't feel like it. And if you're not sitting there going, yeah, it's like, this is a sword. You're going into battle to come up with an idea that's extraordinary because you get bored if it's not. Try to come up with something that's different because the world has a lot of crappy art. We don't need another painting of a vase with daisies in it. You know? Try to do something with it that's going to make people go, I never knew. And you know, I still am surprised when I go onto YouTube and stuff, and people are coming up with fabulous things. And I go, where did that came from? Well, they go and think, what can I do to change the world? And people do. People do. So, you know, become one of those people. Paint the world in a way that we haven't seen before. Think it through. Don't just be a victim of, you know, mediocre and, you know, you can learn how to paint. I've got a really, really close friend of mine. He started to do stained glass. And he got a simple little pattern. And I go, really? He goes, well, I want to learn how to do it. I said, can't you really learn how to do it on something that's even more spectacular than that? You know? And he goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, it's just a pattern. Let's find a picture that we can really make something out of it and do it really, really big. By the end of that, you're going to be a good stained glass maker. So we did a 24 by 36 of this fence with red roses and sky and trees behind it. It was magnificent. 3,000 pieces. By the end of that, he was magnificent, and the window's magnificent. That painting, when you see it, it's truly a work of art. So it depends on what you want to view your painting. Anyway, so if we have the area of light in there, we want to address the colors in the trees back there. So back here, the trees are going to be a little bit more somber, and I'm going to actually, these are like the foothill trees coming down, and the town actually sits. There's actually like a little white church here. So the town kind of sits nestled, and that would be a steeple in a white church. Right? You know where that is now?
I'm not sure.
You know where the fish hatchery is?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay, so.
Where's the farm museum is at?
Yeah, that's where the museum is too. Okay, so we only got 5 minutes. So if there's any quick questions on this, I will be painting on this one next for Patreon and YouTube. and we'll have a critique, but is there any last minute questions for anybody? Yes?
Why do the tree trunks go at an angle? Is that eye direction?
Well, first thing, in the place it actually leans that way, but you know, when I do a tree, it's always like, how does that tree sit in that composition? So my trees over here have angles here, purposely. Look at the angle of this thing, right? Now this is one of the things that I'll leave the people on Facebook with this, okay? And I used to do demos like this, and they would go, God, I would do crazy things. You know, back then we didn't have YouTube, so I was like the source of entertainment for a lot of art clubs. So, one time I used to use flake white, and I'd have this big easel that I would swing while I would talk, you know, as an element. And I had this big thing of white on there, and I talked, and I go, you know, it's lead white, and everybody would gasp. This was the big fear of lead. And so I said, well, it's only dangerous if you know, and I'd reach for my palette knife, and I would scrape through it. I said, it's only dangerous if you kind of scrape it, and then scrape it off your palette and eat it. And I put the whole thing in my mouth. And there'd be a gasp. But then it was actually toothpaste, and then, you know, they calmed down a bit. So anyway, one of the other things on composition, and we talked about this in you know, when I did demos, is that I would play with eye magnets. So I would have a center focal point here, and I would start making these lines in the canvas with dark brown, and I'd go around, and I would have lines that would look like this. Okay, and for some of you who've studied some of the golden mean, which, you know, we'll get to in future Baumann effects, so as some of you who studied, this would look very familiar. Yeah, it's the Fibonacci spiral, but it actually would be a little bit more up in here. But basically, if you notice, see that tree that I put in? See how that follows? So what I would do compositionally is like right in here, I would put a rock. Now this would go away, and I would put some rocks here, and the rocks would actually have these angles in them. And then I would put in the front a log that would lay here, and then over here I'd have another log. Okay, so this log and this log spoke. Then over here I would have something that'd be this angle, and then, or something that might be in here, because this is a spiral that goes in and in and in. And normally when we look at paintings, we go from left to right, so you notice, whoop, it brings us up. So I need something in here. And this is answers your question, are the trees leaning inwards? It's like, no, they're not drunk. They're actually part of the painting. So these trees over here, whatever I put in here, will actually point back up to that secondary central focal point. Accompanies that. And then this comes around like this, and then it hits this. And look at the angle of this. And that comes in, and that will come around here, and then in this part, I'll bring a highlight across. There's a little pathway that I threw in as a footnote. I'd put a highlight right there. Yeah, because that will help get the viewer. And then I'd find something in here. And I might even bring the viewer up into the painting here by taking my shadow and angling that line in the shadow, lights and darks, and then blend it soft, so that there's a subliminal line in there that brings the viewer back into the painting. So everything, it's like composing a piece of music. Everything that's in the beginning kind of runs through the end, same thing as a story. Yeah, and this, you know, what happened with the Renaissance is that the Renaissance has discovered light, and then the Baroque area discovered line. So if you've ever been in a church in Europe, this was, I had a teacher in Stanford, and he loved the Baroque artists. But basically, this is, and we'll leave this for eye magnets, this is your teaser, okay? So you walk into a church, and there you see, you know, a cross. And this is a Baroque church. So you walk in, you see that, and over here there has a little pulpit there. And over here they have a little place that's halfway up a pillar that the priest sits in sometimes to do whatever he does. There's magic in there. And then from there, there's lines that kind of go up this way, and you start having the paintings and the windows. And they have lines kind of going through. And those lines will take you back to the choir. And there'll be a big organ in back with arches, and the choir sits up there, and then you come over here, and the sculpture starts to go up there, a couple of little baby angels flying, and then you go further up, and there's clouds and Mary and all this, and you kind of go up and there's Jesus way up in there. And you can watch people as they walk into the church. They walk in and they go like this. And you can watch, everybody goes the same way, and they kind of screw themselves to heaven, you know? And so, I mean like that kind of, but anyway, so the thing is, the action is like this, right? And the thing is, when you get people to walk in and you spin a couple of times like that, all of a sudden you're susceptible to like, wow, you're in a different space. You know, you come out where it's all that noise, and then you come in and you spin a couple of times looking at all that is theater. And the thing is, if you know all this stuff and you can control it on your canvases, that'd make a huge difference to the viewer. That's what the Baumann Effect is. It's like the impact of what art does to the people you're presenting it to. Yes?
Are you saying then that, say we have a reference photo of a landscape, that we should be evaluating that photo with all of this?
All of this stuff, yeah. Well, you don't have to all the time, but it's good to know it.
Yeah.
It's good to know it. You know, it's just, you can pick and choose what you want. But I think we're just about done here for today. So I want to tell the people on Facebook, if you want more information, go to my website, www.thegrandview.com. And no, it was then thegrandview.org or the stefanbaumann.com. If you want to see lots of videos of stuff that I've done on these conversations, go to my YouTube station. If you want to get more information that's current and more demos, my Patreon station is starting to get fed interesting little details that are very personal, and it's a very different format than YouTube. But outside of that, until we meet again, don't go into your studio. I'm serious. Don't go into your, I feel like Carol Burnett. I'm so glad. Don't go into your studio unless you're going to change the world. Have a grand day.
Well, that was a lot of fun. You never know what you really will discover until you get up close and personal. If you'd like to get more information about what we are doing here on the Baumann Effect, please go to my website at www.stefanbaumann.com. And there you could register for a free book, Everything I Know About Painting. You can get also some information about my coaching, which you can do so at the website. Plus, you can also just give me a call at 415-606-9074. If you'd like to join us in the Baumann Effect live in the studio, you may do so by contacting me at that same phone number. We have tapings every Thursday in Medford, Oregon, if you'd like to join us. If you would like to get more information about workshops, all that information is on our website. So until then, always remember, don't go into your studio unless you're going to change the world, and always paint with passion. I'm Stefan Baumann. You have a grand day.